What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors steps onto a late-night talk show set, only to face unexpected hostility from a host known for his sharp wit? Tonight, we dive into the shocking confrontation between Will Smith and Stephen Colbert that left audiences stunned, and ultimately led to Smith being escorted off the set. If you're ready for the full story behind this explosive television moment, stick around. And if you enjoy content like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button. The atmosphere in the Ed Sullivan Theater was electric that evening as audience members filed in, many having waited months for tickets to see the charismatic Will Smith on The Late Show. The production assistants bustled about, making final preparations while the house band rehearsed their intro music. Behind the scenes, however, tensions were already brewing. "I need to speak with Stephen before we go on," Will Smith requested politely, adjusting his tie in the green room mirror. The show's producer exchanged nervous glances with Smith's publicist. "Stephen's in final prep right now," the producer explained. "He's requested no interruptions before showtime." What Smith didn't know was that Colbert had specifically instructed his staff to keep the actor at a distance before the cameras rolled. The late-night host had spent the afternoon reviewing not the typical pre-interview notes, but rather compiling a list of controversial topics and pointed questions designed to provoke a reaction from his guest. "We need ratings," Colbert had told his writing team earlier that day, pacing his office. "And nothing drives viewership like conflict. Smith thinks he's coming on to promote his new film, but I want real emotions tonight. Raw and unscripted." The show began with Colbert's typical monologue, though attentive viewers might have noticed an unusual gleam in his eye as he introduced the night's main guest. "We have Will Smith joining us tonight," Colbert announced with a tight smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Let's see if he keeps his hands to himself this time." The audience laughed awkwardly, uncertain if the comment crossed a line. But this was just the beginning of what would become increasingly uncomfortable viewing. When Smith finally walked on stage to the sound of thunderous applause, his signature wide grin and energetic wave to the crowd suggested he remained unaware of what awaited him. The two men shook hands, Smith pulling Colbert in for a half hug that the host barely reciprocated. "Will Smith, everybody," Colbert said flatly, gesturing for Smith to take a seat while barely making eye contact. "Man, it's great to be here," Smith began enthusiastically. "The energy in this room is amazing." "Is it?" Colbert interrupted, shuffling his note cards with obvious disinterest. "Let's talk about your new project. Some are calling it a desperate attempt to reclaim relevance. Your thoughts?" The audience fell silent. Smith's smile faltered momentarily before he recovered. "Well, I wouldn't characterize it that way. This film actually represents some of my most challenging work, and I'm incredibly proud." "Challenging work?" Colbert interjected again, making air quotes with his fingers. "That's an interesting way to frame it. Critics are suggesting it's just another formulaic blockbuster designed to capitalize on nostalgia, rather than offering anything new." Smith shifted in his seat, the discomfort now evident on his face. "I think if you actually watch the film, you'll see we've taken significant creative risks. The director specifically." "Speaking of taking risks," Colbert cut in sharply, leaning forward with an intensifying aggression in his tone. "Let's discuss your history of unpredictable behavior. Your public image has had quite the roller coaster ride, hasn't it?" The camera caught Smith's publicist off stage, already reaching for her phone with alarm spreading across her features. This was decidedly not the interview they had agreed to. "Stephen," Smith said, his voice lowered but steady, "I came here tonight to have a conversation about this film that I've poured my heart into. I'm happy to discuss my career and life with honesty, but I'm sensing there's an agenda here that wasn't communicated beforehand." Colbert's smile turned cold. "An agenda? This is late-night television, Will. We ask the questions that people want answers to. Isn't that why you're here? To face the public." The audience's discomfort was palpable now, the atmosphere in the studio transforming from excitement to tension. Nobody had expected to witness this kind of hostile interview, especially with a guest as typically well-received as Will Smith. "I'm here to connect with fans and share something I'm passionate about," Smith responded, maintaining his composure despite the obvious provocation. "If you have specific questions, I'm happy to address them, but the tone feels unnecessarily antagonistic." Colbert chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Antagonistic? I'm simply doing my job. Perhaps you're not used to interviews where you don't control the narrative." Smith took a deep breath. The cameras captured a micro-expression of hurt flash across his face before his professional demeanor reasserted itself. Viewers would later dissect this moment frame by frame on social media, pointing to it as the instant when the interview clearly veered into inappropriate territory. "You know what? Let me try a different approach," Smith offered graciously. The film explores themes of redemption and second chances. "I think there's something universal in that journey that resonates with all of us who have faced challenges or made mistakes." "Fascinating pivot," Colbert remarked sarcastically. "But let's be real with the audience here. Your appearance tonight isn't about some noble artistic mission. It's about image rehabilitation, isn't it? A carefully orchestrated PR strategy." The first commercial break couldn't come soon enough. As the red light on the camera blinked off, Smith immediately turned to his publicist who had rushed on stage. The audience watched in confusion as heated words were exchanged with the show's producer. Though the microphones had been cut, what happened during that commercial break would become the subject of intense speculation. Some audience members later reported seeing Colbert's executive producer engaged in what appeared to be damage control, while others noticed Smith's security detail moving closer to the stage. Whatever transpired in those few minutes would set the stage for an even more explosive second segment of the interview that nobody could have anticipated. When the cameras began rolling again, viewers could immediately sense the shift in energy. Will Smith had returned to his seat, his expression composed, but noticeably more guarded. Colbert, on the other hand, seemed almost energized by the tension, adjusting his glasses, with a smirk that suggested he was just getting started. "Welcome back to The Late Show," Colbert said, not bothering to look at Smith. "We're here with Will Smith, who was just explaining his latest career choices." "Actually, Stephen," Smith interjected calmly. "During the break, I expressed some concerns about the direction of this interview. I think your audience deserves authenticity, but there's a difference between tough questions and what feels like a predetermined narrative." Colbert's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. "Predetermined narrative? That's an interesting accusation from someone whose entire career is built on carefully crafted personas." Several audience members audibly gasped. The comment was undeniably personal and crossed the boundaries of professional discourse. Even for late-night television, known for its occasional barbs. "I've always been genuine with my fans," Smith replied, his voice steady, but with an undercurrent of growing frustration. "And I've owned my mistakes publicly. That takes real vulnerability, not the artificial kind manufactured for ratings." The subtle counterpunch landed. For a brief moment, Colbert seemed caught off guard, not expecting his guest to fight back with such precision. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face before he regained his composure. "Vulnerability is certainly your brand these days," Colbert retorted, shuffling his cards again. "Let's talk about your new director. Sources close to production say you had multiple disagreements on set that created a toxic working environment." Smith leaned forward slightly. "I'd be curious to know who these sources are, Stephen, because that characterization is completely false. Our set was collaborative and respectful, which anyone actually involved would confirm." "So, you're calling my research team liars?" Colbert pressed, his voice rising slightly. "I'm suggesting," Smith replied carefully, "that perhaps your team received misinformation or possibly interpreted creative discussions as conflicts. That happens when information passes through multiple channels." A production assistant could be seen nervously whispering to the executive producer offstage. This confrontational interview was clearly not what had been planned or approved, and staff members appeared increasingly concerned about the escalating situation. "Let's approach this differently," Smith offered, extending an olive branch. "I value honesty in conversation. If there are specific concerns you want to address, I'm happy to discuss them directly rather than through insinuation." Colbert seemed momentarily disarmed by Smith's reasonable tone, but quickly pivoted to maintain control. "Fair enough. Let's be direct then. Many viewers are wondering if your recent public statements about personal growth are genuine or simply calculated image repair. Care to address that?" "I appreciate the directness," Smith nodded. "Look, I can only speak my truth. Personal growth isn't linear, and it doesn't happen overnight. I've made mistakes, very public ones, and I've had to face consequences. That process of reflection and accountability happens both in private and in public when you're in my position." For a moment, it seemed the interview might find steady ground, with Smith's thoughtful response resonating with the audience. Several viewers nodded in appreciation of his candor. But Colbert wasn't interested in allowing this moment of connection. "That sounds rehearsed," he said dismissively. "Did your PR team write that for you?" The audience's murmurs grew louder. Even Colbert's band leader exchanged uncomfortable glances with the musicians, clearly sensing the host had crossed another line. "Nothing about my journey has been rehearsed, Stephen," Smith responded, his voice taking on a new edge. "And frankly, I'm disappointed that you seem determined to prevent any authentic conversation from happening here tonight." "Authentic conversation requires authentic participants," Colbert snapped back, his facade of professional detachment slipping further. "Not carefully managed celebrities who only want softball questions." Smith shook his head, visibly struggling to maintain his composure now. "I've never asked for special treatment in interviews. What I do expect is basic professional respect, the same I would give to anyone I'm in conversation with." "Respect is earned," Colbert said coldly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Even the most casual viewer could sense they were witnessing something unprecedented in late-night television history. "I've spent decades earning respect in this industry and from the public," Smith said, his voice quiet, but with unmistakable intensity. "Not through perfection, but through perseverance and owning my mistakes. I'm curious, Stephen. What exactly is your goal tonight? Because it certainly doesn't seem to be having a meaningful conversation." Colbert's expression hardened. "My goal is to give my audience what they deserve. The unvarnished truth behind the celebrity facade." "Is it truth you're after?" Smith questioned. "Or conflict for ratings, because those are very different pursuits." The camera caught several audience members nodding in agreement with Smith, the public sentiment in the room noticeably shifting. What had begun as an ambush was beginning to backfire on Colbert as Smith maintained his dignity despite the provocations. "We need to break for commercial," Colbert announced abruptly, clearly sensing the changing atmosphere. "We'll be right back with more from Will Smith." As the cameras cut away, the theater erupted in commotion. Smith immediately stood up, removing his microphone while signaling to his team. Colbert remained seated, his expression stormy as his producers rushed to his side. The audience watched in real time as heated words were exchanged. Though once again, the microphones had been silenced. Security personnel moved toward the stage area as Smith's publicist engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation with the show's executive producer. Audience members reported seeing Smith calmly, but firmly gesturing toward the exit while Colbert remained seated, arms crossed defensively at his desk. The commercial break extended longer than usual, leaving viewers at home wondering what could possibly be happening behind the scenes. Social media began lighting up with speculation and early reports from audience members who were surreptitiously posting updates from inside the theater. When the broadcast finally resumed, the shocking sight that greeted viewers would become one of the most talked-about moments in late-night television history. Colbert sat alone at his desk, Smith's chair conspicuously empty. The host's typical confident demeanor had been replaced by a rigid posture and tight expression that betrayed his awareness that the situation had spiraled far beyond his control. "Will Smith has left the building," Colbert announced with forced casualness that fooled no one. "Apparently, some people can't handle direct questions." He attempted a dismissive laugh that came across as hollow in the tense atmosphere of the studio. What Colbert failed to realize was that a production assistant's microphone had accidentally remained hot during the final seconds of the commercial break, capturing a damning exchange that would later leak online. The brief audio clip revealed Colbert's harsh backstage comment. "Either he plays by my rules on my show or he can leave. I'm not here to help salvage his image." The audience's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. Where there had once been enthusiastic applause, now sat a sea of uncomfortable, even hostile faces. The disconnect between what they had witnessed and Colbert's characterization of events was too stark to ignore. Colbert's attempt to salvage the remainder of his show fell noticeably flat. His jokes received minimal laughter. His transitions appeared forced, and the camera occasionally caught glimpses of audience members shaking their heads or whispering to their neighbors. The usually vibrant atmosphere of the late show had been replaced by an uncomfortable tension that was impossible to ignore. "We've got a great musical guest coming up," Colbert announced with strained enthusiasm. But the damage had been done. His credibility with the audience had suffered a significant blow, and everyone in the theater knew it. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the situation continued to unfold. Network executives were already being notified of the incident, recognizing the potential public relations crisis brewing. Production assistants reported seeing Smith in conversation with the show's executive producer in a private office, maintaining his characteristic calm despite the circumstances. "I came here in good faith," Smith was overheard saying. "I've always respected Stephen as a broadcaster, which makes tonight all the more disappointing." The executive producer, clearly distressed, offered repeated apologies. "This isn't what we discussed in our pre-in." Stephen went completely off script. "This isn't how we treat our guests." What the audience and viewers at home didn't know was that Colbert had been under increasing pressure from network executives to boost declining ratings. His decision to ambush Smith had been a calculated gamble to generate controversy and media attention regardless of the professional cost. As news of the confrontation began spreading online, public reaction was swift and overwhelmingly supportive of Smith. Video clips showing Colbert's increasingly hostile questioning circulated rapidly, with viewers praising Smith's composure under pressure. The hashtag #RespectWill began trending within hours. Industry insiders were equally vocal in their criticism of Colbert's conduct. Fellow talk show hosts, many of whom had interviewed Smith throughout his career, expressed their dismay at the treatment he had received. "There's a line between asking challenging questions and creating a hostile environment," one prominent late-night host commented. What happened tonight crossed that line by a significant margin. By the following morning, the incident had become the lead story on entertainment news programs. Colbert's representatives released a brief statement claiming the interview had been mischaracterized and that robust conversation has always been part of the Late Show's appeal. The statement's defensive tone and failure to acknowledge any wrongdoing only intensified the backlash. Smith, in contrast, maintained a dignified silence in the immediate aftermath. His only public comment came through a simple social media post that read, "Always lead with respect, even when it's not reciprocated. Grateful for those who understand the difference between accountability and antagonism." The post garnered millions of likes within hours, with celebrities and fans alike rallying to support Smith's measured response to the situation. His refusal to engage in public mudslinging despite the provocation only enhanced his reputation for maturity and professionalism. For Colbert, the consequences were substantial. Advertisers began expressing concerns about their brands being associated with such controversial content. Several high-profile guests scheduled for upcoming shows quietly postponed their appearances, unwilling to subject themselves to similar treatment. The network executives, who had initially pressured Colbert for higher ratings, now found themselves dealing with a far more serious issue than declining viewership numbers. Internal meetings were called to discuss appropriate responses and potential damage control strategies. "This isn't just about one bad interview," a senior network official remarked in a closed-door session. "This is about the long-term credibility of our platform and how we treat people who entrust us with their time and presence." Industry analysts began speculating about the lasting impact on Colbert's career and reputation. What had begun as an attempt to generate buzz through confrontation had instead raised serious questions about journalistic ethics and professional conduct in the entertainment industry. In the days that followed, something unexpected happened. The incident prompted a broader conversation about the nature of celebrity interviews and the sometimes predatory tactics employed in pursuit of viral moments. Thoughtful pieces appeared examining the fine line between holding public figures accountable and manufacturing conflict for ratings. Through it all, Will Smith's dignified response continued to earn praise. His willingness to engage with difficult questions was contrasted with Colbert's apparent determination to create controversy regardless of the human cost. In many ways, the incident became a case study in how to maintain personal integrity in the face of provocation. The most revealing comment came from a former staff member of The Late Show who spoke anonymously to a major publication. What viewers saw that night was the culmination of months of increasing pressure and a growing disconnect between the public persona and the behind-the-scenes reality. Unfortunately, Will Smith ended up bearing the brunt of that disconnect. So, what happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors faces unexpected hostility on what should have been a routine talk show appearance? As we've seen, the answer reveals as much about the character of those doing the questioning as it does about the person being questioned. If you found this inside look at one of late-night television's most controversial moments enlightening, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're dedicated to bringing you the stories behind the headlines that others won't tell. And drop a comment below letting us know. Do you think late-night television has gone too far in pursuing ratings at the expense of treating guests with respect? Your thoughts matter to us, and we read every comment. Until next time, this is where entertainment meets truth.